Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening in today. I am Kaylee Batesman, the Content Director at She Can Code, and today we are going to be discussing the importance of mentorship. Now, lots of women in business talk about the importance of finding a mentor for guidance, motivation, and career growth. But how do you find a mentor? And more importantly, how do you find the right one for you? I am very lucky to be joined by Dayo Akinrinade, the founder and CEO of the social audio app Wisdom. Dayo is on a mission to make mentorship easier and more accessible for all. So welcome, Dayo, welcome.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Okay, thank you for joining us. To start off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background to begin with?
Okay, so from when I was young, I've always been interested in STEM. I studied computer science at university. And from there, I went into IT management consulting, where I spent a number of years at Big Four consultancies. I started doing sort of testing and quality control, then moved on to business analysis, coding, design, and development, and finished up as a program manager. After doing that for a number of years, I had a feeling that I could do more, and I had sort of ideas and visions, and I wanted to lead a company. So I left management consulting and I moved into the diversity and tech space, where I joined the founding team of a program called OneTech, which to date is London's largest diversity in startups program. And my primary role on that program was to increase the profile and diversity of founders in London that were accessing investment, very specifically seeking more female founders to get funding, more ethnic minority founders, and more founders that didn't have university degrees. Whilst working on the program, we noticed across the program that a key barrier to tech founders in London to access funding was a lack of access to mentorship. So we found that there is, for example, there is no shortage of female founders or female would-be founders who want to start tech businesses. However, from the point of having an idea within startups, it's very critical that you can access a mentor, somebody knowledgeable within the area that you want to build, to ensure that you're solving the right problem and building the right solution. So at that stage, to me, it was crystallized that lack of access to mentorship and networks was a challenge. And although we have great products like LinkedIn, which is like an amazing directory of people, who are would-be mentors, but LinkedIn isn't set up for you to connect with people who you don't already know. It actively discourages you to connect with people, or stops you connecting with people who aren't within your immediate network. So that's where Wisdom was born. And our mission is to, first of all, democratize access to mentoring, but also to leave the world a little bit wiser than we found it. And so the principle of Wisdom is, we are an open social audio community. We connect people for live one-to-one conversations and Q&A centered on knowledge sharing and self-discovery.
I mean, I was going to say what makes Wisdom unique, but I think you just explained it perfectly there. Have you found, though, that it's so much, I mean, it was important before COVID, but now as well, those connections that I think we took for granted, and like you say, if the only way that you're making connections is on LinkedIn, which can be quite limited, surely now, this is definitely something that is imperative for especially founders to make those connections to ensure that their company is a success.
I would say absolutely. In a post-COVID environment, and also with the current state of funding within tech, it is, the numbers and the reports are saying that it is more challenging now for tech founders to gain investment, which then puts more onus on founders to have a very solid case for funding. And a key part of having a very solid case for funding, I would say, it is having access to mentorship and to knowledge to ensure that what you're building is solving the right problem in the right way.
Can you tell us a little bit about Wisdom? Can you give us a bit of a rundown?
Sure, absolutely. So Wisdom, we are a venture capital backed social audio app, and our mission is to leave the world a little bit wiser than we found it. And what Wisdom does, being a social audio app, we connect you for live one-to-one conversations and Q&A centered on knowledge sharing and self-discovery. So what this means in practical terms within Wisdom is, and let's go with, because in essence, with Wisdom being a community, and we tend to have two types of users or members. And we have users who are knowledgeable people, experts, coaches, and people within them who have something to share and something to give back. And then we also have people who are knowledge seekers or on their own self-discovery journey. So in essence, we sort of have mainly two types of user. For the user who is on their self-discovery journey or who is knowledge seeking, they would download Wisdom. If you go to we're in the Apple Store, we are in the Google Store as well. And you could download the app, and within a few seconds, you're in. And there are two main ways you can use Wisdom. The first main way is our voice answers feature. Now, think of voice answers as an audio version of the traditional Q&A. And what it means is that you can find any expert on Wisdom and tap a button and send them a question offline. And if the expert chooses, they can record a voice note answer, which you can then receive back, yes, and find on the app. Yeah. So in essence, you text a question and you get a voice note answer. Reason being is I find a lot of us are really busy. You probably also, you have an inbox and a mailbox full of queries. And when I think about going through them and typing the responses, it's quite soul destroying, and I put it off. But on Wisdom, I can open up the app and I can see all the questions that have been submitted to me offline, and I tap a button and I'm able to record. It has to be less than 60 seconds, a voice note answer, which they can receive back. And so, and something that's key around voice answers is it's asynchronous short form audio. And in essence, what that means in simple terms is, for me to ask a question of an expert on the app, we both don't have to be online at the same time having a live conversation. I can text the question in my own time. They can record the answer in their own time, which I think makes it a lot more practical.
Yes.
In terms of, we're talking about mentoring today, and, the traditional mentoring model. The traditional mentoring model, I find it's very labor intensive, and it has a low success rate. And I say this from my time working within the diversity and tech space, where we would, set up mentoring programs. But on one side, there was a lot of effort to recruit the mentor, and then the mentees, and then they would have to schedule a meeting. Whereas what we love on Wisdom is it's dynamic, it's live. And so, yes, so we have voice answers, which is our Q&A feature. And then we have the live one-to-one audio conversations. And on Wisdom, anyone can go live, but particularly perhaps a knowledgeable person or an expert or a mentor, and they can give a talk on a set topic about what they know. And the audience can listen in. And if the audience have a question, they can send a guest request. And if the speaker accepts, they will be granted a timed slot with the speaker to ask their question. A typical slot on Wisdom would tend to be 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And so in essence, we set up a platform where people can go live to speak about what they know. Knowledge seekers can listen, they can participate to ask questions, and then every conversation on Wisdom is recorded and is saved to the mentor's profile. Also, all of a mentor's answers are saved to their profile as well, which means that if you share the link to your wisdom profile, it's like your sort of mini audio library. And I can see these are all the 1 minute answers that you've given. These are all of the talks that you've given. And that's really set up to help creators and experts to sort of package up their knowledge, make it shareable to the world, and making it easier to share. Because it means that a lot of the time, I think some of us, we get asked the same questions, perhaps, how do I get into tech? If I start coding, what language should I start with? I'm not great at maths, I don't know. But what wisdom will enable, a knowledgeable person to do, or somebody in tech, is to record 1 minute answers to all of these questions. And then you can just share them the link and say, hey, go and take a listen here. So it means, because I'm keeping this within the context of, coding and mentoring, it's allowing people who want to give back, they can use wisdom to, to mentor and to educate, but almost in their spare time. You don't have to be online all the time having conversations. Your knowledge gets sort of captured, and then it's shareable. You can share it out on social media. You could share it on Twitter.
Yeah, which is amazing, because I think I've heard of, those stories where ladies say, I got a mentor within my company, but actually our meetings kept getting moved. And as you say, people are busy, and they might start out, with good intentions of saying that, this is definitely going to happen. But especially if you have somebody who you're very lucky enough to secure someone in senior leadership, and then all of a sudden, you can't secure a meeting with them. Or even, there are great mentor programs within companies sometimes, but it's meeting that person within your own company when you both happen to be in the same building, but meeting people outside of your company to help you progress, outside of that particular role, and other areas of technology that you haven't even thought of before, because you've never met anybody in a different area, is invaluable. To find lots of different people across the tech industry willing to share their wisdom. You're an incredibly successful entrepreneur, and one of the few Black female founders able to tap into VC funding. So why do you think there are so many barriers for female entrepreneurs when it comes to funding?
So PitchBook's 2021 data indicates a significant gender gap in funding, and female-founded companies are receiving just 2.3% of US venture funding. Also, when we look at investing partners at venture capital firms, women account for only 11% of the investing partners. So there's a vast underrepresentation on the side of female founders accessing venture capital, just 2.3%. And then if we look at the side of who's writing the checks and making the decisions, that's just 11% of women. So, I think it's safe to say that the funding and the venture ecosystem is largely male dominated. That's indeed what the numbers are telling us. And I do think that this gender imbalance has shaped the dynamics of fundraising and has embedded systemic level biases that disadvantage women in a multitude of aspects. And I'm specifying on the word systemic, because I think where there are systemic imbalances, those are particularly challenging to identify and to tackle, because it's inbuilt, it's systemic, and it's been there for decades. I think one great example is it's a Harvard study, and they studied founders pitching for investment. And they focused on typically after a pitch, you say, does anyone have any questions, right? And then they're opened up for the questions and the Q&A. And what they found was that male founders were asked promotion questions. Promotion question, for example, oh, I hear there's a massive market in this aspect of your business. What are you going to do to go after it? Whereas female founders were asked prevention questions, such as, oh, I hear there's how are you going to protect your business from potential intellectual property theft?
They're seen as risk.
Yes, and that's a dynamic that it's been observed within the study, and of course the type of questions that you are asked, and to your point, the investor's perception of the, you know, like the mindset, and as you said, the risk profile and the potential of the founder is being sort of shaped up within the fundraising process. I also, when pitching for investment, and these are anecdotal observations, they indicate that female founders are more conservative than male founders in terms of revenue forecasting, which in turn disadvantages their fundraising efforts. Now, when we look at, I think, gender and how oftentimes boys and girls, men and women are raised differently, to me, it's unsurprising. And these are all things that, you know, I think angel investors and investors, I think there's great work happening now within the tech ecosystem to make individuals on both sides of the coin, so the founders and the investors, to be more aware of these biases, because I think once they're called out and they're aware, then it can be mitigated again. So for example, if perhaps there is a female founder giving a more realistic, modest revenue projection, you know, versus a male founder, if the startups are similar, you know, I would say don't take those valuations or projections at face value, you know, examine them and come up with, you know, what you believe the actual picture is.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we've all heard those stories as well, and there are some quite famous ladies who, you know, they tried to go for funding and they struggled, and then when eventually they got their funding and they sold their business for, you know, millions of dollars later in life, it just kind of highlights, as you say, to that the ladies do struggle to find the funding necessary, and I think as well, and this leads on to our next question about diversity in tech and why that's important, but also diversity in investment is incredibly important, because, you know, there are more female, you know, angel investors that just understand a little bit more about, you know, not just what's being pitched, but where that lady is coming from. Then, you know, there is a lot more chance that that lady will secure the funding she needs, rather than, you know, pitching to an all-male panel. But the same with working in technology, obviously. And why do you think it's important to improve diversity within the tech sector?
Okay, so particularly speaking to, and I think, you know, of course, being, you know, in the UK, we could speak to this from a UK perspective, although I believe this is largely applicable globally. But I think within the UK, reportedly, women make up just about 29% of the tech workforce. And I think although participation is improving, there are still barriers. And I mean, if we can increase female participation within the tech workforce, I mean, I think from an economic perspective, we you know, we will benefit collectively as a country. From an innovation perspective, there are numerous studies that show a linkage between diverse teams and the rate of innovation. So this is something that can benefit also innovation at large. I think tech is also a great opportunity for women to improve their own socioeconomic outcomes and situations, because of course there is currently there's a skill shortage across tech in, I would say, probably pretty much any country. And so upskilling and being able to participate within an industry where there is a skills shortage, and there's a really alarming projected skill shortage as well. So not just today, but if the trend continues that way. So yeah, I think there are numerous great reasons why we want more female participation in tech, and in terms of solutions and improving this, I say I believe there's a complete life cycle, and there's so many aspects that it can be improved. And that starts with me by examining why within schools are there less girls participating in STEM subjects, because that then affects the pipeline further on. I believe in looking at parents being conscious about what types of toys they are buying for children, because we do still see the toys that are more perhaps geared towards, you know, maybe like sort of construction and modeling, and those are early visualization skills that are being built even with the toys that little boys and little girls are playing with, and maybe having more equity there, and then going into education, and then of course within the workforce and companies themselves, and trying to make them more welcoming places for women, for also mothers, for parents, for individuals that perhaps communicate with different communication styles and archetypes. Something I found I definitely experienced within my time within corporates is that I would say typically, you know, within a corporate company, there is typically an archetype of person that will be successful within that company. And that can be down to sort of communication style and presentation style. And where we find that women are often, we are often perhaps more modest about our achievements. And we sort of believe that working hard will get rewarded. But actually, I learned in my time, and I had mentors that told me in my time, it's not just good enough to work hard and get the result. It's that you have to be visible. You have to talk about what you've done. You have to have more senior influential people talking about you and what you have done. And you know, and on one hand, I think women have, we have one job navigating those structures and arguably playing the game. But then on the other hand, I think companies also have a job to neutralize those structures, so that if we have perhaps more introverted leaders, you know, more you know, quieter leaders, quieter people with ideas, companies, and it's something I'm very conscious of as well, ensuring that you create space for different archetypes of communicators, you know, how people, you know, do all of the ideas come from a noisy brainstorm and everybody around the table, whereas some people may prefer to say, oh, let's reconvene in an hour and, you know, work on their own and come back. If not, it tends to be the same type of person and, you know, the same type of ideas that are promoted through, and then the similar type of person that's retained within the organization, who will then go on to recruit more people, you know, like them.
Yeah, funny you saying that. I completely agree with people work differently, and especially across different teams as well. You tend to get, you know, the louder people are stereotypically on the sales team, and you might get the quieter developers. I, you know, work with words, so I mostly, you know, known as quite quiet people, work with words, but I think as well, mentoring is so important for that, just to let people know as well that, or just to hear from somebody else that you're not the only one that is feeling that way. And I think to hear it from somebody else that is in a leadership position, and to say, you know what, I felt that way, or here is that guidance to get you through this, and that it's okay, that you're having these thoughts and feelings at work. That doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, you're not going to be successful. And so I think sharing stories across mentoring is absolutely key, obviously, to somebody's success. But also, my next question was about, you know, do you think mentoring could be the key to cracking the lack of diversity within tech?
I think it's absolutely, I think mentoring is absolutely a very key component for, as you said, cracking the lack of diversity within tech. And I think that can start from childhood and formative years, and providing exposure to STEM related activities. It could be toys, books, science museum, programs, and things like that, which I think in essence is a different aspect of mentoring. And then I would say yes, all the way through to schools and education, and, you know, the workplace. And then in terms of external role models and mentoring through that. I think that that's very key as well. So where they say that, what is it? If you can't see it, you cannot be it. And I think it sounds very simple, but I think it is very, I find it's very critical, especially with younger ones. And when they're asked, what you want to be when you grow up, that's typically very directly influenced by what they've been able to see. Like, I think now I recall in a recent survey, one of the top careers that young people said they wanted was to be like a YouTube influencer. And it's not surprising, because that's a medium within which they're spending a lot of their time. And I think absolutely having early exposure to role models and showing that tech can be fun, showing that tech is embedded into so many aspects of the products we use and how we experience life. And I think it's a great medium through which to, I think, create and to bring ideas to life. And it's so mentorship, it's absolutely something I very much believe in, and it's absolutely what wisdom is built around. So to know that you can open your phone and access a community of helpful, wise, and intentional people who are happy to share and give back and exchange ideas. Because as you said, sometimes the key barrier as well is that it's the environment. I believe that as individuals, oftentimes the environment that you are born into, that can shape who you have access to and what you get to see, and who you can talk to about certain ideas. And so the more we can do to open up opportunities to access people, smart people, irrespective of where you happen to be born, I think is very important.
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the mentees and the mentors. Do you have any advice or tips for a mentee looking for a mentor? And also, do you have any words of wisdom for those wanting to become a mentor?
Sure. So I would say for a mentee who is looking for a mentor, I would advise to not just look for one mentor. Look for a panel of mentors, because we often need guidance on different aspects of, so whether it's life or mental health and career. I think it's also important to have multiple mentors, because it avoids putting too much pressure or expectation on one particular individual. And then I would also advise, when you identify the person, also sometimes people will automatically identify perhaps the most senior or the most successful person around them, and I would advise sometimes those people are very busy, and sometimes if they're maybe 10, 15 years ahead of you, they can give you some advice, but actually oftentimes the person who is perhaps 5 years ahead of you can still very much remember what it was like to be in your shoes. So don't always just default to the most senior person. And then also don't start the conversation by saying, I would like you to mentor me. Start the conversation by asking a question. Start the conversation by having a conversation, and in essence, bringing it back to, I was very intentional around the design of Wisdom, because there's two main ways to communicate on the app, and one is to text a question where you get a voice note answer, and then the other one is to have a one-to-one conversation. So we don't start by saying, will you be my mentor? We start by having a meaningful interaction, and then from there, if that's naturally going to build to more interactions. And then for anybody wanting to become a mentor, I would say, great, absolutely do it. There's so many organizations now that you can join to, who can sort of structure things and put things in place. And of course, you can, go to the App Store and you could download Wisdom. And, the beauty of Wisdom is you could be mentoring in your pajamas, at home, after work. You don't have to wait to be matched to go out and meet someone. You can go on Wisdom, create a talk title and do a talk, get the link to that talk and email it to a few people email it to a few people who would benefit from it. And then the best thing I think about Wisdom as well is that your knowledge is encapsulated and it lives on. So you can be helping people beyond the actual moment, beyond the live moment of the mentoring.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about just don't just say to somebody, do you want to be my mentor? Because I think that's such a good point, that it's almost sometimes we forget our manners on across technology, and we go straight in and say, can I have this from you, can I have that? Whereas you would never have walked up to somebody at a networking event and said, hello, I'm so and so, will you mentor me? You probably would have stood there and had a chat and exchanged business cards and had a drink, and eventually you might meet them again for a coffee at a later date, and then kind of develop that relationship. But you're absolutely right, it's best to have that conversation with somebody first, instead of just texting them and saying, please be my mentor. And that you'll get more from the relationship because of it, and hopefully will be a longer lasting relationship as well, not just a couple of messages exchanged and that's it. My last question for you is, do you have any advice for those looking to get into a career in tech? Now, you have quite a career in technology. You mentioned at the start how you got started. Is there anything that you wish somebody had told you?
Oh, that is a really good question. Yeah, I would say a piece of advice that would have really benefited me early on in my career in technology would have been that I was focused on upskilling and learning new skills, which I think it's inevitable within a career in technology. So I was learning data modeling, functional design, and all other kinds of things. But a piece of advice I would have benefited from when I was an employee was that do not just focus on learning soft skills and technical skills, to also focus on learning and understanding the dynamics of the business model of the business within which you are working, and understand the value levers, understand the path to profitability, because then you begin to understand how the senior people are thinking, because they are not just thinking about producing the product and the service, whether it's a product or a service that the business is doing. They are also thinking about the running and the management of the overall business, which in turn oftentimes shapes the decisions that are being taken. And so that is a tip that I didn't know. Also invest time to understand the business model of the company or of the business within which you are working.
Dayo, we are running out of time, but we would love to know if you could share with us what are the next steps for Wisdom.
Yes, so I would advise for anyone listening in, if they are curious about connecting with a community of people who are sort of sharing and not knowledge seeking and on a self-discovery journey, head to the App Store and search for Wisdom Social Audio. And in terms of what's coming up next, I would also love to share that just 2 weeks ago, we were App of the Day in the UK Apple App Store, which is super, super exciting and a massive honor. And in terms of what we have coming up next, I'm super excited. We've just launched our new voice answers feature, which is the audio take on traditional Q&A. And I definitely advise people to check it out now. As soon as you open up the app, you are fed a stream of 1-minute voice answers, so bite-sized chunks of wisdom that has been sort of curated and pulled from the whole community. And I would absolutely advise people to check it out. And because I always say as well that I think I believe everybody can mentor, because I think we each have a unique lived experience that others can benefit from. Even if your advice is don't do what I did, that's still very
great advice.
useful advice. And what we want to do is take it out of people's brains and record it somewhere, so it can be useful to others in the future.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much. We would love to have you back again on a future show to hear about those new features from Wisdom and to hear how well you're doing. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights. And to everybody listening, thank you for joining us again, and we hope to see you again next time.